What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another DBAP show. Phil Mendoza here with Alpha Bowhunting, and want to first of all thank you guys. I've been getting some private feedback as far as implementing this stuff again. You know, talking about the story with my dad on that first episode. I appreciate that. I really want to be able to be transparent with a lot of what we do here, and I've always tried to be honest and transparent. Sometimes too much. But nonetheless, you know, I appreciate the feedback. So getting right into it, today's show is going to be a little different, okay? I am going to start off by, well, I'm gonna basically read a little excerpt from an article that I read that was actually sent on a newsletter. And I've purchased a couple of the UltraView products. Great products, I should say. A ton of respect for those guys out there, what they're doing, putting their foot down and really making some waves in the industry, in the archery industry, with a lot of what they're doing. So kudos to them. However, this is not something that I'm bashing or in any way I don't want to come off as that, because the article that was written by George Ryals, I want to just first and foremost say there's probably less than a handful of people that I really, when they say something, when they talk, I'm like, my ears really perk up, and I'm really intrigued, I should say, because there's a lot of information in archery that's either regurgitated, recycled, what have you. It's somebody's different way to say it. And I'm not saying that, I don't want to be arrogant to say that I don't like to hear what other people say. I'm just saying there's certain people that I really enjoy hearing their content because they were able to refresh it, repackage it, and explain it a certain way. And George Ryals is one of the guys towards the top of my list. To paint the full picture, George Ryals deals primarily with target archery, bow hunting from the whitetail stance. He's an Eastern-based guy, so I'm not sure if they're out of Florida, but I've sat in on multiple of his seminars at ATA. Loved him. George is a super smart guy. If you don't follow George or follow some of the things he's done with coaching in youth, I mean, hats off to him. And I'm just going to go ahead and get right into the excerpt of the article that was written, and it's talking about peep size, okay? Peep size to housing size specifically. And the part that I wanted to read is short. If you want to read the article, I'll try to link it below. But it says, keep your peephole as small as possible. You only need the peep to be large enough to see contrast between the target and your aiming device. Again, talking about your housing. Forget ringing the scope with the peep, and that's what we talk about a lot, of lining up your peep sight with your housing. Ring the target with the peep. Your pin is in the middle of your scope, so it will align itself even if you can't see the edges. If you're using a multi-pin box, ring the target, then use the appropriate pin. Be sparing with the clarifiers unless they're used. So this is something that I disagree with. And again, even as he comments about using a multiple pin sight box, you know, center the target and then go to the one pin and just focus on that. I've shot tournament archery before primarily with an up pin, no lens. And I'm going to agree 100% with what he's talking about when you have the aiming device that you're using is in the center of your housing. Be it an up pin, be it a dot, be it whatever it is. But if it's centered on the center and you're using a circular device as your peep sight, as you anchor and reference, yeah, I've seen results of this, and I incorporated this the last few years of when I was shooting back in 13, 14 competitively at the ASAs. I'd go to an ASA and the lighting was always different. You'd go into these tunnels, it's nothing but tunnel shots, shadows, it was really difficult to see. So I would sit there and I'd have a threaded peep, and I'd take the peep and I'd put the next size down, aperture in, and I'd shoot a couple more arrows and I'd see my group tighten up a little bit. And I'd go down another size and I'd go down and it'd tighten up a little bit more. And I'd go a little bit more and then it'd start to open up. Oh, too far. So then I'd back it out, I'd put the other peep back in, or the housing, or the aperture, excuse me. And what started to happen was, initially, I would start with lining up the housing, on the Peep, and then it'd get to where it was just slightly inside. Maybe I could see the inside edge of that colored ring, and then maybe I'd just start to lose the inside edge. And then, but because I was still centering a circular object on a circular object, with the pin in the center, I was able to see the results of this. However, with a multiple pin sight, specifically if you're shooting 4 or 5 pins or more in a sight, and you have pins that cover the majority of the spectrum of your housing, you're not centering a specific peep or a pin, excuse me, or gap. If you're gap shooting, it's even worse, on a circular object anymore. Because if you can think about this, let's just say we got a 4-pin sight, and you're using your Peep to center, and you're no longer using that outside housing as a reference. Now you're just specifically getting your target and centering your Peep on that target. You're getting that specific pin gap or pin sequence. If that happens to be at the bottom third of your housing, now you're looking at your level below your housing and everything. It becomes difficult to repeat. And this is where I respectfully disagree with what they're saying on the centering portion. In the event if you're using a multiple pin housing, specifically, as you get into more pins, and then depending on where they sit in that housing ring. If we just look at the nuts and bolts of what is a compound bow as opposed to traditional equipment, there's systems in place, references, if you will, to help you become more accurate. With that being said, everything from a draw length setting based off how you set your modules, that's a reference. Where you set draw stops, if they have draw stops, that's another reference. As you anchor, that's a reference. If you have your nose or a kisser or a nose button, that's another reference. A Peep sight being tied in on your string at a specific point is another reference. As you continue on, and then you start to look at that Peep sight and center that housing, that's another reference. So I think that in target archery, I think it's more practical to consider not focusing as much on a sight housing to center it. I'd like to disagree just with the concept on a multiple pin sight, because I still think that reference is valid and important. And again, interesting, as people have opinions and perspective is different in archery. And again, I consider George to be a super influential person with a ton of following and very smart. I just would disagree on this point. And again, I think that reference of your Peep, as you would if you're looking down at a tube and you're trying to align that tube, so you're not looking at it oblong in any way, you're trying to align that tube to make sure that reference is now centered, and that next check mark, if you will, is achieved in your sight aiming process. As you go to those individual pins, specifically if you're pin gapping. I mean, if you're pin gapping, you got 5 pins and you're trying to shoot 46, 47 yards, and that's towards the bottom of your housing, there's a lot of moving parts. And to simplify the process, I would still like to think that, because I know I've done it from both standpoints with target archery and hunting, I think it's more being able to duplicate from shot to shot it's more consistent when you can consider utilizing that reference. Now, another misconception, right, that throw in there when we're talking about Peeps, most bow hunters want to put a big giant Peep sometimes because I need all the light to come in for those low light hunting situations. Well, technically, if you actually set your Peep sight to where it's perfectly centered on your housing in a normal bright night, normal day, sometime between 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and then you go look through your Peep sight in your housing in that last 30 minutes or first 30 minutes of shooting light, you're going to actually see that there's a little bit of halo around there because of the way your eye perceives the light, and it's not as bright outside. So that's actually not necessarily true in all situations. In certain situations, it's just too dark to shoot. So no matter how big of a Peep sight you use, however much light it's going to come in, most times those situations are not legal shooting light anyway. So I would just say that utilizing that reference is still important, even though on the target archery side, guys like the UltraView guys and George Ryals, again, super smart, not taking anything away from them. I just think that that's more applicable and practical in a target setting. In a multiple pin bow hunting situation, especially as you got driver sights and everything else, I think continuing to utilize that reference is important. Anyway, that's the topic on this one. Comment below. Let me know what your take on it is. You know, maybe you're going to tell me I'm a dumbass, or, you know, whatever the case is. Fair enough. You know, there's not a, as long as you can duplicate your process and be accurate, then that's what's important. I just feel like the more people that I've talked to and worked with in this specifically Western hunting situation or settings, it's more the opposite, that the housing is important to center on the Peep site in most situations. So anyway, I mentioned last time about little catchy tags. I'm going to throw one at you guys here as I close out. But again, comment, subscribe, like the videos if you would, if you feel like you're enjoying the content. And I wrote an article for the CBA, and I closed it with this. I'll reference this article later on. This is one of the articles I've been a little bit more proud to have written, just because it incorporates family and a little bit of a message. But at the closing, it just says, as a father and an ever-evolving bow hunter, I will simply say DBAP. For those of you who know what it means, you know that. But for those of you who don't follow me on my other platforms, a PC definition of that is don't be a pretender. Good luck searching for a green light shot opportunity and sending an arrow that finds its mark. So maybe that's a new upcoming closing tagline, if you will. So hope you like it. See you guys soon.